Men are logical rather than emotional. Is that true? Modern advice disempowers and belittles men. It's full of generalizations, limitations, and a scarcity mindset. But there is a different way. In this series, The Unstoppable Man, we'll be looking at some of the damaging narratives which are holding men back, why these are damaging, the unhealthy beliefs that often underpin these narratives, what the healthy and confident versions of these beliefs are, and how to create a new set of beliefs and mindsets that is healthier, will help you be more confident and develop better relationships and outcomes in your life. My name is Sam and I am the founder and lead coach here at Catch. Unshakable confidence is the key to getting everything that you want in life and dating. So on this channel, we give you all of the tools and techniques to build that unshakable confidence and become the most unstoppable version of you. If you're interested in coaching when that is available or any of our products, you can find all of that information in the description box below. We're also running a free to enter competition giveaway at the moment where we're giving away prizes worth up to £250. So if you want any information on that, all of that can also be found in the description box below. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the myth that men are more logical than they are emotional, and that men shouldn't be emotional or show their emotions to others, and how this is damaging men's confidence and their mental health and their relationships. So getting into today's topic. Shut down your emotions for success. Showing emotions isn't attractive. Men are naturally logical and not as emotional as women. We hear these statements again and again in modern discourse. We talk about the importance of shutting down our emotions, putting our emotions away, and how they hinder us from success, finding a partner who respects us, creating the sort of relationships that we want, or being seen as a leader, whether that's in work or in our personal lives. However, this couldn't be further from the truth, and this is why. Firstly, recent brain studies have shown that male and female brains are a lot more similar than previously understood, and that the structure of our brains is pretty much identical, and the only differences that have been found so far in research are in reasoning and the amount of function that's in that reasoning area. And that difference in reasoning was actually with women. So what that would imply through that information alone is that women actually have a slight biological advantage when it comes to logic and reasoning, but also it can mean that they overthink more compared to men. However, apart from that, brains are very similar. So that would imply that most of the differences that we assume or see in men and women, particularly in Western societies, are not driven by biological differences, but are driven by socialization. There may be an aspect of hormones that comes into this, but that of course varies person to person throughout the month, throughout their life. So the purposes of this video, we're going to talk about the more stable biological differences. So that would imply that if we look at society and make these generalizations that men are more logical or men aren't emotional, that's more due to socialization than it is due to our brains. And that also means there isn't a biological limitation on men when it comes to emotions, which is important for what we're going to come on to later in this video. Also, what we're seeing in society is an increasing understanding of the challenges around men's mental health, whether that's rates of male suicide, rates of men's mental health and the decline of that. And also we tend to see within men compared to women increased issues with emotional regulation, such as anger, reactivity. And there is a lot of discussion about male loneliness. So when you look at this latest evidence about our brains being more similar, and then you see the discussion or the increased awareness around men's mental health and the issues that men are facing in society, you can see that something isn't adding up. And this narrative that men are not emotional, all that's doing at the moment is restricting men from talking about the struggles that they're having, making them feel more lonely, making them feel like they have to deal with these things alone, or that having emotions or negative emotions or even positive emotions, we don't often talk about male happiness and joy and fulfillment. It's more about, right, go out and earn the money and protect and provide. So we have in society this group of men who are suffering and these narratives that are keeping them stuck where they are. And even when we look at some men's empowerment speakers, a lot of them go back to this more traditional role of what a man should be. And when men are struggling, they talk about doubling down on exercise, doubling down on their work, doubling down on making money, being that strong person, or facing all of those emotions alone rather than looking for the support around them. So what's interesting is even some of the people who are trying to tackle or support men with the issues that they're facing, some of the solutions that they're providing are very individualistic and I don't think move the conversation forward or help men. In fact, it just reinforces this traditional gender role that tells men how to be. And we've explored some of the damaging narratives about how men should be in the first 2 videos of this series. So we'll link those down below if you're interested in that. Rather than giving men the tools to open up, lean on others, and process their emotions in a more healthy way. Being in touch with our emotions and being able to process our emotions and regulate our nervous system is extremely important for health, both mental health and physical health. It's important for focus and being able to focus on the things that we want to achieve in life, whether that's in work or in our personal life, and being present with the people around us. And it's also important for our relationships, so being able to show up in the best way and the most vulnerable way where we can truly connect in all of our relationships, whether that's with a colleague, family, friend, or a romantic partner. And being able to process our emotions and regulate our nervous system also helps us to, when we want to open up, do that in a stable and balanced way and seek support without what's known as trauma dumping. And I actually wrote an article a while back for an online magazine called New Thinking about, are we looking for connection in the right places? And in that article, we explored that some people bottle up their emotions, and we do see this more in men, bottle up their emotions, but then they see their romantic partner as the person to open up to. So because of this issue with loneliness or not being able to express their emotions or feeling they can't, some men don't open up to friends or family members, but then when they go on a date with someone who they don't know well, they almost overshare, or everything that they've been feeling comes out onto that person. So being able to process our emotions and regulate ourselves in a healthy way is not only good for us and our relationships that we already have, but it also helps us when it comes into the dating world and being able to share an appropriate amount and know what we can process ourselves, what we need to seek support for, and getting the right support at the right times, and using that as a way to strengthen and connect with people rather than potentially pushing them away. If we aren't able to identify and process our emotions or regulate ourselves, what can happen is we either lose confidence over time because we don't trust ourselves or allow ourselves to process our emotions. So we push them down and then those eat us up internally and causes us to build resentment, anger, see things in a clouded way, feel like we're the victim of the circumstances we're in or the world around us, and feel stuck and like we can't get out of that situation. And it also damages relationships because we're resentful of others, we wish that we could talk about how we're feeling, but we don't feel like we can, or we can end up bottling it up and then we see people sadly take their own lives because they can't see a way out of it. So it's really critical for every single person, not just, for certain genders or certain people in certain situations. And there are significant positive impacts, and it also reduces risk to us. And what is a shame is when we look at modern society is that there's almost permission for women to feel emotions because they've been told that they're more emotional. And that's both the positive and the negative emotions. So women feel more able to be silly, express joy, be happy, go after the things that make them happy in life, whilst also being able to share where they're having a difficult time, where although women have been shamed for that in the past, and being emotional is seen as a negative thing. So there is this double-edged sword for women that we speak to as well. Whereas men are often brought up and told that they need to push down their emotions, that it isn't manly, that it's not masculine to have even happy emotions. And that is causing a lot of men to feel like they can't express their emotions. So there are these pressures from society that are then taken in individually, and people feel like they can't be their true, authentic selves, which is a shame. And as we said at the start, brain scans are now showing that male and female brains are extremely similar. So that would imply that the strength of this that shows the strength of this socialization and how it's putting men into boxes and holding them back from being the true and most healthy version of them and confident version of themselves. So how do we start to break out of this damaging narrative or this limiting mindset about men, that men are more logical rather than emotional and that men shouldn't show emotion? Well, we've already talked about why it's important for each individual and why it's much healthier. And we've also looked at some of the scientific evidence that's emerging about why that narrative is not true. So let's think about what are some of the other benefits. If we're going to break out of this damaging narrative, let's think about some of the benefits for men of processing their emotions, identifying those emotions, and becoming more regulated in a healthy way, not just pushing those emotions down. Well, one thing that I don't see talked about at all in modern narratives is how logic and emotions come together. But how we live in society is that 99.9% of what we're doing in life involves people. If we have a business, we're selling to customers who are people. If we work in any type of job, we're going to have colleagues or customers or shareholders who are people. All of the relationships that we have in our life, whether even just friendships, involve people. And even the relationship that we have with ourselves, we are a person with our own emotions, biases, experiences that shapes how we see the world around us and the situations that we are in. So to separate logic and emotion doesn't make sense, because if we want to apply logic to a situation, there are always going to be people that are involved in that decision, whether they are customers or colleagues or friends or even acquaintances. So if we are to apply logic to a work problem, to how to better serve our customers, to the relationships that we're in, then we need to take into account the emotions and the thoughts and feelings of the people who are involved. So you cannot look at a work situation, maybe a new product, a new strategy, or an issue with a colleague without understanding how the people in that situation might be feeling or what might be driving them to behave in a certain way. So part of making logical decisions is taking into account emotions. Part of being able to step back and make more rational or logical decisions means understanding our own emotions, our own biases, our subjective way of viewing the world, and at times we have to challenge that. If we want to create a new life for ourselves, become more confident, or achieve outcomes we haven't achieved before, we need to be able to see the world in a different way than we have previously and remove some limitations or some biases that have been getting in our way. That requires enough self-awareness to understand the subjective rules that we're putting onto life and how they're affecting us. So I'll give you an example. If we look at some modern advice that is aimed towards men about empowerment and dating, Some of the beliefs linked to this topic are, well, it's not attractive if men show emotion. It's not masculine for men to show emotion. However, we have just looked at all of the reasons why that's damaging to men, why it's damaging to relationships, and why it's not working. So it's not actually logical for men to push down their emotions to become more attractive to women or men or non-binary people, whoever it is that they date, because it sets that relationship and that individual up for failure and other forms of issues. So that is a situation where someone could say, look, objectively, it's not attractive for men to be emotional, and therefore I'm not going to do it. But when you look at it in the broader sense, it's not logical to enter a relationship with somebody who doesn't find emotions attractive, because that's not sustainable in the long term. Also, when we talk to women or when we see the discourse online, many women and men, etc., are saying, no, we want you to show your emotion. We want you to be more emotionally aware. And actually, it's the lack of emotional awareness or dysregulation that's causing us to not want to move forward with some relationships. So there's evidence of the contrary that we can then use to take, and that logic is important. Or if we take another example in a work context where perhaps a colleague is being difficult with us, blocking us out of work, or not engaging with something or an initiative that we're trying to put in place, you have to look at the emotions in that. So to logically respond to that difficult colleague, we have to put ourselves in their shoes and say, right, why may they be acting that way? Could they be going for a promotion, or could their job be at risk, and that's why they're trying to keep the work to themselves? Could it be that they're threatened or jealous of us, and that's why they don't want to bring us into different work situations? Or have we had difficulties in the past which has meant that they don't trust us to bring us into those situations? So that is an extremely logical, rational way of looking at a work situation, but it entirely depends on putting ourselves in the shoes of the individual we're having trouble with to try and solve it. So emotions are key to being able to make rational, logical decisions. So separating those two things doesn't make sense. Also, what's interesting is I think there's different definitions of what logical means or emotional means. So some people look at the word logical and what they actually mean is literal. They look at the situation very literally rather than applying logic to a situation, because as we just showed, applying logic requires emotional maturity and empathy. Also, the word emotional in itself to some people means crying, sad emotions, rather than experiencing the full breadth of emotion, including happy emotions. Anger in itself is an emotion, and that's something else that we see, that there's this narrative that men aren't emotional because maybe they don't cry as much, but men are much more in tune with anger and have reactivity in other ways. And often their way of processing, at least in modern society and in Western society, those emotions is through sports, drinking, other forms of physical activity, getting out that anger and that pent-up emotion in other ways. So hopefully by this point in the video, you're convinced that men are indeed emotional beings, the importance of emotions, why that's more healthy and critical for confidence. So how do we start to identify and process those emotions in a healthy way? And how do we create a life that is more emotionally healthy? Well, first we need to be able to identify the emotions, and a lot of people struggle with this. What we found is the easiest way to identify and process your emotions is silence and peace. So what we would suggest is that each day, at the end of each day, taking 5 or 10 minutes to sit down without your phone, without any screens, and try to clear your mind of everything that's happened during the day, whether that's kids or work or something else stressing you out. Do a few deep breaths and just try and bring your energy and your attention back internally into yourself. Emotions are often felt in the body. So if you're holding back from expressing something, that's often felt in the throat. If you are sad, that can be felt in the heart. If we have some form of anxiety or nervousness that can be felt in the stomach. And you can see this in how we talk about things, like I'm heartbroken or my gut is telling me something. So we do have phrases which indicate that. So if you can take 5 or 10 minutes just to relax and come back into your body, you can often feel where you have some stress or pain in your body. And that can be an indicator of what you're feeling at that time. Also, when you take a few breaths and try to clear your mind, observe what comes up. So observe what things are on your mind, what reflect on the day, reflect on the week, what stands out to you as being positive, what stands out to you as being difficult or you're working through. And then spend some time just reflecting or journaling on what is it about those things that is exciting or makes me happy, or what is it about those things that feel more difficult? And then try to name how those situations make you feel. Do they make you feel sad, angry, frustrated? Do they make you feel hopeful, excited, and have lots of anticipation, or even just content? So try to think about the words that you can identify with either the feeling in your body or the thought or reflection that you're having about certain situations going on in your life. And then practice just naming those emotions. So write down what those words are that come up. And there's no right or wrong answer. We're just trying to get more in tune with how do different situations make us feel, what reactions do they bring up inside of us. And if you have the space for this, also think about, okay, what assumptions am I making about this situation? What beliefs could be making me feel this way? And is there another way that I could look at this situation? And how would that make me feel? And we do have another video about how to build your beliefs. So we'll link that down below. So if you have the time, once you've named your emotions, to start exploring even further, what are the beliefs underpinning this emotion or the mindset, and how, wanting to change those to look at it more positively, that video will help you. So once you've named those emotions or identified and named some of those emotions and written them down, the next important step is just accept them for what they are. What we see with some of our clients is that they have an emotion that they consider negative, and then they admonish themselves for having that emotion and wish that they had a different emotion. And that isn't healthy either. The way to process these emotions is to feel them, is to accept them, sit in them for long enough to let them release. And research has shown that it takes between 60 and 90 seconds of deeply letting ourselves feel the emotion, letting ourselves sit in it, to then release it. So by being able to identify it, name it, and just feel it in our bodies, and then just accept it for what it is, that will help us then release the emotion, and then it will stop having power over us, and we can then start to see through it and how we want to respond to what's going on in our lives, or where different beliefs or mindsets may be holding us back. During this process, try extremely hard not to let yourself shut down or distract yourself with screens. What we see in men in particular is that they might look at a screen, or they may go and do exercise as a way to avoid this emotion and not work through it. But as we've said, this ends up just pushing it down. So try to let yourself feel it and release some of it, and then you can go and do something to distract yourself or let yourself reflect on a situation and how to respond to it. But in this moment, we just want to identify it, accept it, let ourselves feel it so that it can be released. And then you can go on to finally doing something to help work through that emotion, whether that's exercise, yoga, reading, cooking. Try and do something that nourishes yourself and helps yourself process it. And then you can park it and move on to something productive. You don't have to decide an action to take straight away to do with that particular situation. You can go on and do something that feels good for you, and then often your brain will start to process in the background and figure out what to do next. And the final step is, after you've done the self-reflection and worked on it yourself, is we don't just want this to become something that you grapple with individually. We want to start to create a support system around us that can help us with these emotions, celebrate the good ones and the good times, and also work through some of the difficult periods. So what we talked about so far is individual action, What we want to do is start to curate a life where you feel safe to do that with others. So practice verbalizing those emotions and how you feel about a situation to people around you. Now, if you're more comfortable, you can start with a coach, you can start with a therapist. Journaling is also helpful because even though that is an individual action, it feels like you are expressing it. Some people verbally journal, so you can speak out loud and practice saying to yourself or just out loud how you feel about a situation and naming those emotions. And as you build your confidence and comfort, start to express how you're feeling about a situation to the people in your life. So family members, colleagues, friends and family. And try not to be attached to their reaction. So sometimes what we can see happen is people start to express emotions to the people in their lives, and they don't get a positive response or an affirming response in that first instance. So they then shut down again and say, look, I told you this was, people didn't want me to show emotion, so I'm just not going to anymore. I appreciate that it's really difficult when you're trying to do something new to express an emotion and then not get the response that you feel like you need in that moment. But what we're practicing now is just you making the habit of expressing yourself. So try to be detached from the reaction that you get. It's not about getting the positive affirmation or the support you need at this stage. It's just about you honouring yourself and what you need and saying these things out loud. So start to practice that and see how you get on. I do think that you'll be pleasantly surprised by the reactions that you get. That's what we hear from most men, that they were scared to express an emotion because they'd been told that that was unattractive. But actually it brought them closer to people, developed healthier relationships, and helped them open up and trust the people around them. So give it a go without attachment to start with, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And even if there are people in your life who don't support you, by continuing to show your emotions and open up and talk to people about how you're feeling, you will then gather over time if these are people that you want to keep in your life. So it will also help you figure out, okay, do I have the healthy relationships with the type of people I want in my life? Because if they can't honour my emotions or talk to me about my emotions when I'm processing them in a healthy way, then maybe this isn't somebody that I want. And maybe I need to seek out safe spaces and other people who support me. And so you can look at different kinds of sports clubs, you can look at men's spaces. There are men's spaces that are popping up where it's safer to talk about emotions. You can look at online communities if you're safer to start there. Although we would say that it's better to be in person with people and honour your emotions. Staying online can create a barrier. So look for those spaces that honour that rather than be discouraged if you don't get the response you need immediately. And as you practice this over time, what you'll notice is that you surround yourself with new people, you create a new habit, you create a new behaviour. It becomes easier as you continue because you're practicing it and getting better at it just as any other skill. And everyone can do that, including men, including people who are older. Anyone can develop a new skill at any time, so believe in yourself and do this for you. And nurture the friendships and the relationships that you deserve. So I hope that helped. Would love to hear your experiences with this down below, or if you have any questions, please do let us know and we will get back to you in the comments. Thank you for liking, sharing, commenting and subscribing, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers. Bye.